It says, Now Adonai said to Avram, Get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, and away from your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse anyone who curses you, and by you all the families of the earth will be blessed. And then jump down to verse 7. Adonai appeared to Avram and said, To your descendants I will give this land. So he built an altar there to Adonai, who had appeared to him. And then let's go over to Galatians chapter 3, verse 16. Yeah, 3:16. I'm sorry. And Galatians 3:16 says, "Now the promise, and that's the promise that we just made or just read. Now the promises were made to Abraham and to his seed. It does not say and to seeds as if to many. On the contrary, it speaks to one and to your seed, and this one is of course Messiah." Okay, so um, this promise that's being made to Abraham in Roman numeral number 2 in your notes, God speaks 8 promises to Abraham and to Messiah. So it's kind of an interesting combination how he does that, isn't it? He speaks to both the one that he's giving the promise to, but he also speaks to the Messiah at the same time. And so we see here Rabbi Shaul Paul is telling us in Galatians that this seed, by the way, this is how you know if you've got a fairly decent, was one of the ways you can check to see if your translation is a fairly decent one. If it says seeds, it really is not, it's really not even worth having, okay, in my opinion. It's because this is huge. This is a direct reference to the Messiah, not to his progeny. There's a huge difference in those two things. Wouldn't you agree? Okay? So he's made the promise to the seed. All right? Now, with that in mind, we're going to look at those in a minute, but I want to go back now and I want to read some more of our parashah here. So go back to Genesis 14:17. You're what? Well, that's, yeah, what version is that? Okay. Yeah. I think the New King James, when it first came out, had seeds. I think it did, and they changed it. It says seed, singular. Well, yeah, you would think so, but I had a translation once that was seeds, and I got rid of it. Yeah, right, 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 exactly. Yeah. Usually the seeds is actually in the Tanakh in the Old Testament is where it is. It's where you'll find it. In the section we just read, we'll have the plural if it's not really on top of things. Anyway, let's turn to Genesis 14:17 now. I want to read 17 through 23. Then we'll go into chapter 15, and then we're going to cover these points in our study. And if there's something else in here you'd like to talk about, feel free to bring it up. So after his return from slaughtering Kedorla Omer and the kings with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the Shavah Valley, also known as the King's Valley. Melchizedek, king of Shalem, brought out bread and wine. He was Cohen of El Elyon, God Most High. So he blessed him with these words, Blessed be Avram by El Elyon, maker of heaven and earth, and blessed be El Elyon, who handed your enemies over to you. Avram gave him a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Avram, Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. By the way, the king of Sodom is Satan, and he's still asking for the same thing. Give me the people and I'll give you everything else. And and we have to watch out for that because obviously God's interested in the people. Okay? So, but Avram answered the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand in an oath to Adonai El Elyon, maker of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a thread or a sandal thong of anything that is yours, so that you won't be able to say, I made Avram rich. I will take only what my troops have eaten, and the share of the spoil belonging to the men who came with me. Honor Eshcol and Mamre, let them have their share. And then let's go over to 15:7. He says, Then he said to him, I am Adonai who brought you out from Ur-Kasdim to give you this land as your possession. He replied, Adonai God, am I to know how am I to know that I will possess it? He's questioning the Lord and saying, well, how am I going to know that I'm going to have all of these blessings? And, we've done the same thing, haven't we? God makes promises, and we go, well, how am I going to know? It's a legitimate thing. How am I to know I will possess it? He answered him, bring me a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a dove, and a young pigeon. He brought him all these, cut the animals in two, and placed the pieces opposite each other, but he didn't cut the birds in half. Birds of prey swooped down on the carcasses, but Avram drove them away. As the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell on Avram. Horror and great darkness came over him. Adonai said to Avram, know this for certain, your descendants will be foreigners in a land that is not theirs. They will be slaves and held in oppression, for 400 years. But I will also judge that nation, the one that makes them slaves. Afterwards they will leave with many possessions. As for you, you will join your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. Only in the 4th generation will your descendants come back here, because only then will the Amorite be ripe for punishment. After the sun had set and there was a thick darkness, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch appeared, which passed between the animal parts. That day Adonai made a covenant with Avram. I have given this land to your descendants, from the Vadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River. And then he goes on with the rest. Now, it's interesting because Abraham says, how am I going to know that this promise is real? God really never answers him. Did you notice that? In fact, everything he says is really not all that great. He says all of your descendants are going to be slaves for 400 years, and you're going to die and be buried. And the point being, God doesn't always answer our questions in the most direct human fashion. We like yes or no. We like it clear and simple. And God doesn't always do that. And sometimes the answer can leave you in more confusion than the question, quite honestly. I mean, how many times has God ever spoken to you and you go, well, great, what does that mean? And it's because he wants us by faith just to walk in faith, trusting him and believing him for it. How does a 5-year-old doesn't understand physics, right? You can explain it all day long. They don't get it. Well, God can explain things to us all day long, and we just don't quite get it. We don't have what it takes to quite understand. Ear is not heard, eye has not seen. And that's not just it because it hasn't been presented. We just don't get it. Okay? And so this is what we see in this parashah. Okay, now in Roman numeral 2, back in your notes, we've learned already that God has spoken 8 promises to Abraham and to the Messiah. The number 8 is what? The number for new beginnings. Okay, new beginnings. Now, Abraham is truly the new beginning. I think Abraham is really the quintessential one new man. He was an Iraqi in modern day terms. He was out of a household of idol worshippers and idol makers. His father was an idol maker. He really he wasn't brought up in the faith. There really was no faith to speak of at this time. But God looked upon Abraham and said, there's something about him that I can tap into. He saw something there. Just like when he was viewing all the people in our day, he saw you. And he said, you know what? There's something there. There's a spark there. We weren't seeking him. He said, you didn't find me. I found you. Let's not get confused on that, right? We may have been seeking in our own sort of way, but he found us. And when he found us because he saw something in us that the Father had placed there. I mean, that's the only way you can explain it. And he said, you're mine. You know, you belong to me, and so let's go. We're going to have a little walk here, and we're going to come together on this thing. So, 8 promises, new beginnings. Now, Abraham is truly this new beginning. He is a Gentile who becomes the father of the Jewish nation, both spiritually and biologically. I personally believe Abraham actually goes through a DNA change. Because somewhere along the line, we have to explain the origin of Jewish DNA. And why is this important? Because the Jewish people are the chosen race. They have a DNA. They have a marker. They are a people group unto themselves. Where did that come from? Because there was no such thing as any Jewish person anywhere prior to this. So when God does this work with Abraham, he does this complete natural and spiritual work, I believe. The Bible tells us first came the natural, then the spiritual.
Would you say that would have happened when he crossed over the Euphrates? It's like a baptism, like a change of...
Yeah, I don't know when it happened, but it happened in that time frame somewhere. You know, Abraham really wasn't completely faithful to what he was called to do. He didn't leave his father behind. He didn't leave Lot behind, and took his father as far as Haran, which wasn't very far, and then had to wait for his dad to die. So he really wasn't 100% obedient to God. He was moving in faith, like we all do. I'm sure he was. I mean, and Abraham, you know, Abraham in the Jewish faith is considered so great because he was the first. You and I get to rely on a lot of stories that we believe are factual. And we look back and we go, okay, God did this with Abraham, and he did this with Jacob, and he did this with Daniel and Ezekiel. And so we go, okay, I can get behind that. But Abraham couldn't look back to any history. God hadn't done anything as far as Abraham was concerned.
The book of Jasher talks about how Seth, Shem, that Abraham learned from Shem.
Yeah, in fact,
If you look at the timeline, he would have been alive when Abraham was alive.
well, they were all alive. I mean, they all crossed over quite a bit.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
That he would have gotten some training there.
Yeah, he may well have, but there was really no stories to be had like we have. That's the point I'm making.
Other than the flood.
So, well, yeah. So, um, and actually, at this point, Oh yeah, at this point the flood has taken place. But Abraham is looking back, but there's really no history there to speak of. And so the rabbis believe that Abraham is one of the real greats because of that, because his faith was more of a pure, raw faith, if you want to call it that way. Um, so he was a first. God was doing a new thing, this number eight. Now, in letter A here, let's look at these different promises. In letter A, he says, you will be a great nation. And of course, Abraham has become a great nation. Uh, Jews, Muslims, and Christians all claim Abraham as a spiritual father. These three faiths constitute the largest people group in the world when they're combined. Okay, and they all look to Abraham as their spiritual father. The Jews, of course, claim him as their biological father as well. Okay, um, and so he has become the father of a nation. There is no doubt about that, both in the natural and the spiritual realm. So he says, I will make you a great nation. In B, the next promise that he makes, and this would be back in Bereshit 12, he says, I will bless you. I will bless you. Now let's turn over to Ephesians chapter 1. And verse 3, yeah. No, you can't. Yeah.
And so I was kind of reading it afterwards. Well, come to find out, right? What do you tell them to do? How am I going to know that? Well, listen, bring me a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, about a young pigeon, right? In other words, do what I tell you to do.
Yeah.
Keep my commandments, right? And then at the end of 15, it says, I have given this land. That day Adonai made a covenant with Abraham. I have given you this land to your descendants from the body of Egypt to the great river.
Right.
So, same way that we get the promises by keeping this commandment.
Yeah. But now, think about this. Here, God is saying, get all these animals, build the 2 altars. We're going to talk about this in a little bit. Was he hearing the audible voice of God? Or was he hearing in his mind like typically we hear from God? You know, you get this fleeting thought and you go, well, I think that's the Lord. And you go, okay, I'm going to build a couple altars here. And you kind of get to work doing that. And then you go, okay, now I need some animals. And you get the animals and then you start going, well, man, is this really the Lord? Here I am. I'm in the middle of the desert all by myself doing this. This is like weird. You know what I mean? Think about it. I kind of always look at these stories like that and I go, wait, what if I was the guy doing that? What would I be thinking? Because I kind of think I'm a normal kind of a person. And I would be wondering about the whole thing. You know what I mean? Or did God actually appear to him? So here is this son of an idol maker. He thinks he's heard from this God, Elohim. He doesn't even know who he is. Maybe he's heard some stories. But, Noah was a little weird. He built this boat in the middle of nowhere. And
One thing to hear stories is another thing to
but how was he confronted?
Well, he lived in there was many gods. I mean, the thing
Yeah.
at that time was there's many gods. And now all of a sudden, here comes this one and true and living God that's speaking to him and is saying, I'm the true and living God. All the other ones are idols.
But remember, all the other gods are demonic in nature. They do manifest. I mean, they show up right there in your room. They speak. You can touch them.
No, thank you.
It's very real. So all I'm saying is he's confronted with this. He may not have even seen the Lord, only thought he heard his voice. I'm just trying to paint this picture so we understand. This wasn't like this big banner dropped out of heaven with these instructions on it, and the music was playing in the background, and Cecil B. DeMille was blowing the trumpets, and he's out in the middle of the desert, and he needs to leave his family and go to a place. I'll tell you when you get there. What? You can imagine he's telling his dad, yeah, I heard from the Lord. He said, just travel west, and I'll tell you when you get there. Have you lost your... What if one of your kids said that? Have you lost your mind or what? It's just weird. It's faith. But on the other hand,
his brother, he and his brother had already been thrown in the furnace. His brother had been consumed. He came out of the furnace, and all this happened in front of his father. So, don't you think he would have a little more faith?
well,
Believe a little more?
but don't forget, that's all Jewish reckoning. That's not biblical. Yeah, I understand that, but
But it does say
which is referenced. I understand that too, and I read the book of Jasher. However, I'm just saying, it's a little bit. This Abraham is a man of faith.
Oh, yeah.
Any way you slice it, he is going where no man has ever gone before. Even Adam. I mean, Adam's created, and there's God, talking to him.
But I think God was talking to Adam in a more
Personal.
way.
I do too. Yeah, I do too. So Abraham's at a great disadvantage. Anyway, he says, I'm going to make you a great nation. Okay? Then he says in B, I will bless you. Now, in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 3, praise be Adonai, Father of our Lord Yeshua the Messiah, who in the Messiah has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in heaven. Now, how many spiritual blessings are there in heaven? A lot. And he has blessed us with every single one of them. What's interesting is when Abraham sends his servant Eleazar to Laban's house to find a bride for Isaac, the first thing he does, Eleazar does, is he shares how blessed his master Abraham is. He's very blessed in every way. So God has really, but it's been a slow going because it took 25 years for the child in Jacob's for Jacob to come along, and for the promise of the progeny and all of this took years and years and years to transpire. It wasn't an overnight thing. He has, Abraham goes through the whole thing with Hagar and Sarah. A major split in the household, and a lot of grief in that. His oldest son, Ishmael, he's got to kick out and send him out into the desert, and he hopes that he's going to live out there. So there's a lot of pain in this. There's a lot of suffering in this. So Abraham, just like us, we read it in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, but
He lived it over a lifetime. Sometimes we get confused, like when we read the book of Acts. The book of Acts spans 66 years. That's a lifetime. I'm 66. That's as old as... That's old. Thank you, John. Soon to be 67. Another few weeks. Yeah, boy. Did you? Well, I'm like 3 weeks from now or something. I don't know. December 4th is me. Yep. I'm telling you. Yeah. Time flies. But that's a lifetime. So the book of Acts took as long as I've been alive. So it's not like one thing was happening right after the next. There's time periods in there where it seems like maybe nothing's going on, kind of like in our own life. Yeah, well, we go through that, don't we? See God moving powerfully, and then we go into this period where there's nothing happening. You go, man, is he even alive? Where is he? Did I hear him right?
And maybe it was happening, and it's just not recorded because we don't need to know that too.
Yeah, I've often shared with our congregation. You've probably heard this before, but you should write your own gospel. It would blow your mind if you did. And it wouldn't be heresy because it's just the gospel according to Matthew, or the gospel, the good news according to Bruce. What's the difference? You can write a gospel. That's not. That's what it is. But it would blow your mind when you wrote it. It would read like the book of Acts. I mean, it would, because you're hitting just the highlights. But nevertheless, you go, oh my gosh, I'm a spiritual giant. And I didn't even know it. So, yeah. So he blesses him. I will bless you. In C, he says, I will make your name great. And remember this promise. He said 8 promises were made to whom? Both Abraham and Messiah. Okay? So Messiah, because what's happening here, God is beginning to formulate a people group for himself. Remember, up until Mount Sinai, God is only dealing with individuals. One individual at a time. That's all he's doing. With Abraham, that starts to change, because with Abraham, he becomes the father of a great nation. So that great nation has begun to be birthed. It takes till Sinai to really come to the place where it can be called a people group, but nevertheless, this is the beginning of that. And so that people group are going to now be the progeny, if you will, really of Messiah. Is he not our older brother? Is he not our Messiah, our God, our King, our Savior, our friend? All of these things, okay? So this promise is being made to the Messiah as well. So it's a very much and very really a messianic, these are messianic promises, in fact, not just to Abraham. You will be a blessing. And of course, Abraham is a blessing in the sense of the Jewish people, also a blessing to us as our spiritual father, as the Christian church. Everyone in the Christian church acknowledges Father Abraham. We used to sing that little song, Father Abraham. I always forget his name's Abraham. I always have to think about that now, you know. But Father Abraham had many sons. Yeah, crazy. Yeah, see, I rest my case. Okay, so he becomes this blessing to all of us. In E, he says, I will bless those who bless you. This has got to be a motivator for us. Go over to Matthew 25:40. For our country, and, you know, unfortunately, we're on a fairly decent track with that at the moment. Which we knew we would be for a season anyway. Matthew 25:40. I think, personally, one of the most important issues that needs to be at the forefront whenever we vote is Israel. You know, if we can get everything right in that regard, everything else is going to work out for us. Okay? If we bless Israel, we will be blessed. If we protect Israel, we will be protected. These are the promises. And we are in a sense, you know, I'm not totally sold out to this idea, but we certainly used to be a Christian nation. I think we still are the remnant of a Christian nation. We're still probably the most Christian nation in the world. I think you could argue a strong case for that. I think it's 90 or 95% of all missionaries come out of America. So the gospel is being spread by Americans. 90 to 95% of all missionary funds come from American pockets. So it's not, quite honestly, people are always, I don't know what it is, but when we hear all these crazy things about Bible prophecy, we always think God is intent on wiping out America. And I don't get it, because America is not at the center of Bible prophecy. You're hard-pressed to even find America in the Bible. So I have a hard time, and I wrestle with that, because I'm not really sure that that's correct in its understanding and interpretation. We are, in fact, the greatest light to the world right now, still, in spite of ourselves. So who's spreading the gospel? It's America is spreading the gospel. And so we have to realize that. We don't want to let down our guard and think we're okay and we're safe. But, you take America out of the scene and the gospel stops. Of course, God will raise somebody else up, obviously. But, we are, by and large, don't forget, the silent majority in America is still the silent majority. And even though somebody like Hillary can get the popular vote, a lot of that is because of the way our voting system is structured. Yeah. I mean, none of my kids even vote, because living in California, your vote doesn't even count. Our daughter does. The boys don't. And they say, why vote? And so 7 o'clock comes along, the polls close, and they right away give California to the Democrat. So why do you vote? I think if we went to a popular vote, you might see a difference in California, because there is a lot of conservative people in California, but they're the silent group. We're not out banging on the street corners. So I think there's a lot of America that is got a foundation that is somewhat solid, if that makes sense. We have been blessed. And he says, I will bless those that bless you. We are Israel's greatest ally. Still. In spite of all of our liberal politicians of years gone by, we are still standing with Israel stronger than anybody. And according to the Word, that means a lot. According to the Word, I don't see God preparing to wipe us out, quite honestly.
I don't think he wants to wipe us out, but I think there is an element of judgment because of all of the blood crimes going around from the born in 80s and millions.
Yeah, I mean, we have all of our issues. We have all of our issues. There's no doubt. I mean, we're filled with sin, but we still. This is a promise. Those that bless you, I'm going to bless. And he has been. And I believe as long as we continue to bless Israel and stand with Israel, he's going to continue to bless us. I just believe that. Why not? I'm a native Californian. I haven't turned away at all. I say let's take California back.
There you go.
Run all the liberals into the ocean. Sounds good to me. I think we have to rise up and be a voice of one crying in the wilderness. I'm a Californian. I'm proud of it. I'm not willing to just write California off. I think this is our land. God gave this land to us. We need to fight for it. You know what I mean? Yeah, well, that's really true. So anyway, in Matthew 25:40, it says, the king will say to them, yes, I tell you that whenever you did these things for one of the least important of these brothers of mine, you did them for me, is what he says. Okay? So when we bless Israel, we're blessing Messiah. When even in humanitarian aid, nobody outgives America. Nobody. There can be a flood in Timbuktu. We're the first guys there with the most money. Every time. God sees all of that. So yeah, we've got all of our garbage. And we need to be working on that. But we still have some strong points going for us. Does that make sense? And I think we need to be reminding God, if you will, Lord, we are blessing people. We are spreading the gospel. We are caring about the orphans and the widows around the world. We're standing on your word. And you said if we will do these things, you will bless us. Right? I'm really getting tired of reading books. Well, God is going to just do away with America. I'm tired of that. It's not even biblically correct. I'm not even sure America is even involved in the tribulation. Read the word. That could be a localized thing.
I don't think that America's in the Word because there's a choice. I think, you have the choice of blessing Israel and blessing the Lord and having things going well, or not, and having exactly a place.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of arguments on that, but I know that God deals with Israel, and then anybody that's dealing or coming against Israel, God deals with them. But, the largest kingdom in the history of the world is not even mentioned in the Bible one time. Genghis Khan. The largest kingdom in the history of man. Made the Roman Empire look like a dwarf little state. And yet it's not even mentioned. So just because it's big and powerful doesn't mean God is concerned about it. So I think we just have to kind of look at some of those points. And we need to stay positive in these days. I see too many believers going around, oh, woe is me. God's going to smite America. Well, then move. Get out of here. Take your smiting with you. You know what I mean? It's just so negative. Exactly. But guys, these are the promises, and we're doing them. As Americans, we're doing them. We're standing with this little podunk country. Right? And we always have. And hopefully we always will. Now, if we turn from that, the whole scenario can turn. But so far, we're sticking with them. Yeah, well,
We had 8 years of not so much.
no, we had 8 years of problems, but
What do you feel about why there's a church now that has taken down historical, Washington's church, George Washington, the church he went to. They want to take down the plaque because they said it was offending. And there's so many places now taking down monuments, taking down that. Is that anything biblical that, why are all these things coming down?
I think it's liberal mentality. Personally, it's you can deny history, ignore history, and then history repeats itself. Slavery is a blight on American history. But you got to remember something. You know who started black slavery? Was blacks. That's, our guys didn't go into the jungle looking for them and trapping them in nets. They bought them right on the beach. That's how we started. Now, we were the last civilized country in the world to really condone and have slaves. But slavery is not the worst crime. I mean, Israel had slaves. In Torah, they're even told how they are to deal with their slaves. I'm not condoning slavery, but that is part of our history. To take down the plaques and stuff, in my opinion, is just foolishness. No.
It won't work. It's an attempt to try to erase or cover up our past, which only dooms us to repeat it.
Yeah.
Those who forget history's lessons are doomed to repeat mistakes.
Yeah, I think it's just I think it's a liberal mentality, personally, and well, it's allowed because Washington is liberal. I mean, they're all in the same pot together, and they're all just as moronic as one another. And I don't know how to be any nicer than that because liberals just don't think. They just don't even have a brain. I don't know what to say. The what?
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, they're basically they're throwing a collective tantrum over President Trump's election. All it's going to do is guarantee him a
Well,
second term in office.
well, let's hope that's right. But
You know what they do? We had
you
to
know,
laugh in their faces. What a bunch of fools.
liberal. You know, the problem with liberal politicians is they've taken God complete. They try to take God completely out of the equation, and nothing can go right that way. And that's where they're at. I mean, and professing to be wise, they've become fools. And that really, I mean, Hillary thought she deserved to be president because she was a woman. That is so ridiculous. It's
I can sum it up in
it's
2 words.
it's
You lost.
yeah, but I'm just saying it's a spirit, and it has blinded the left. Now we have our problems on the right too. We're not a bunch of angels running around, but they're blinded, and they're so blinded I can't even figure out their reasoning. It's well, they are corrupt. Yeah. And you know what scares me is the Republican Party is only half a click behind them right now. It's embarrassing to be a Republican right now. But a lot of Republicans are following suit, and it's really not good at all. Yeah, we need to drain the swamp. We need to put godly people in, and it's simple as that. But you know, unfortunately, the Christians they vote for their pocketbooks. They vote. I mean, I know pastors that voted for Barack Obama. You know, and you know because they think that the welfare and stuff is the godly road to take. And yes, I can understand what you're saying, but uh, you know, so it's just craziness. Uh, we're calling right wrong and wrong right. We're just where the Bible said we were going to be. We're there. You know, I've been walking with the Lord since the early '70s, and we prayed for this day. Well, here we are. You wanted it, you got it, Toyota. You know what I mean? Yeah, I know. We're there. You know what I'm saying? And it's scary. Right now, I think the safest thing we can do politically is just what we're talking about tonight. Israel is the key. Back it, because Israel is going to come out of this when the dust clears. Israel will be still standing, and I want to be as close to them as possible. That's all I can tell you, and I think that's the safest place to be. And Israel's they're not a group of righteous people either. You know, they're just as secular as we are. But that's between them and God. God says, you stay close to them, you'll be okay. Carol. Yeah. Well, and this is where pastors, too, have to say, you know what, I don't care about the write-off. I'm going to tell people exactly what's happening. If you want to take the tax write-off away, take it. I know he is. And it's good, but the pastors have been afraid to tell their people. And so, oh, just vote your conscience. Well, that's telling the church to vote their conscience is like giving a gun to a 5-year-old. Really. You know, it's pretty dangerous. All right, let's move on. You get me. I'm on my soapbox here. You get me going on politics, and I know it. What? I'm sorry. Okay. E. I will bless those that bless you. In F, I will curse those that curse you. We won't read it's the same chapter, Matthew 25:41 to 45. It says, I'm going to curse those that curse you. Israel's the key. When we vote for candidates, and we got another election coming up just right around the corner, vote for candidates that are pro-Israel. Let everything else work out. Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Well, this is his kingdom and his righteousness. Do this, and everything else is going to work out. Okay? If you read the book, you realize we're never going to get rid of the sin in our country. It's not going to happen. It's just going to get darker and darker and darker. That's what the word says. Right? So what can we do that's proactive? We can get close to Israel. Sin is starting to take over the land. Sin is taking over the earth. So you can move out of California, but where does that put you? Well, I don't know about that, but Hawaii's very liberal. You know, yeah. You know. All right, G. In you all families will be blessed. Now, this is interesting, and I want to share this with you. In the Tanakh, the commentary on Bereshit, on Genesis, cites an opinion regarding the words, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. The opinion states that the verb v'nevraka, which means will be blessed, is related to the Mishnaic Hebrew term mavrik. Okay? Mavrik, which means to intermingle or to graft. It's a very common term used in agriculture. Mavrik means to graft. This opinion is based on the grammatical anomaly found in Genesis 12:3. Nowhere else in the Torah does the word to bless, barak, appear in this nifal form, as it appears in the patriarchal narratives. The same verb root, however, is commonly found in this form in regard to grafting of plants. So we could retranslate this this way. One might translate the verse as, all peoples on earth will be grafted into you. And now, obviously, Rabbi Shaul knew this and understood this. And this is what he talks about in Ephesians chapter 2, about grafting in. Okay? And of course, the theme, although the word isn't used, grafting, the theme is spoken of in Romans 11. Okay? The same type theme. So all families will be grafted in. So, and of course, that's how we come to faith. We come into the faith of Abraham. We serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. People quibble over how do you say the name of God. Well, God's favorite term and favorite name for himself is the God of Jacob. That he calls himself that more than any other name in the Bible. I'm the God of Jacob, and of course Jacob is also the name Israel. So the God of Israel, the God of Jacob, this is the most common name that he refers to himself by. And so who are the patriarchs? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So who are we serving? What God did we choose to serve? The God of Abraham. When I'm sharing and when I'm evangelizing and whatnot, I usually use that term more than any other term. We serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It really spells it out. And in fact, when God introduces himself to like Moshe, the burning bush, that's how he introduces himself. He says, I'm the God of Abraham. You want to know who I am? I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Only later does he say Yud He Vav He. And of course, he refers to Abraham, and when he's revealing himself to Abraham, he reveals himself as El Shaddai, which we don't even know what that means. Okay, it's a name without meaning, really. It's considered to be the multi-breasted one, but we would speak of his nurturing qualities and stuff. But we are not even positive that's what the name Shaddai means. There is no real known translation for the name Shaddai. However, it's a very huge name in our faith. Every mezuzah has the shin on it. For Shaddai, that's what it's for. Okay, and then in H he says, "To your descendants I give this land." This is good because the land belongs to the physical descendants. The physical, not the spiritual descendants of Abraham, the physical descendants. And that claim is made by the Jews. Now, the Arabs could make that claim, but they really don't take it back in the natural that far. They drop it off. They do take it back to Abraham for their spiritual father, although they don't follow the same spiritual faith, but they have cut themselves off from the root of Abraham in the natural realm. One day I think that will change because we know that Egypt will come to faith, and Egypt represents the Arab world. God's going to do a mighty work amongst the Arabs, and rightfully so. That is actually Abraham's oldest son. And if you read the promises made to Ishmael, then you realize that the same promises were made to Jacob. The two share the same promises, right down to the number of tribes. It's pretty phenomenal. So God has a heart for the Arab people. He is. In fact, somebody in the church gave me a sheet of paper. I don't even know who gave it to me. People give me things on Shabbat, and it's, oh yeah, I'll read that, yeah, it all goes in the briefcase, But 25 Orthodox rabbis, I've got every one of their names, have all said that they're really starting to think that Yeshua is the promised Messiah. I tried to do some research on these rabbis, and I just didn't take the time to get very far with it. I was telling Doug and Rob at dinner all about that. But very interesting because they are starting to really think things through a little more now. And of course, that's really what we're waiting for. I personally believe that the thing that we're waiting for, the return of the Lord, is for the Jewish people to say Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. I don't think it has anything to do with earthquakes, volcanoes, and revolutions. Those are the beginning of birth pangs. I think we're looking for the Jews to come to faith in large numbers. He says, you're not going to see me again. What does that mean? That means we're not going to see him again. That means he's not coming back until Israel says, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. So that's what we're looking for, guys. Everyone focuses on all the glitter. Forget about that. Those are beginnings of birth pangs. How long can birth pangs go on? Well, a long time. A long time. And yet, we're starting to hear these rumblings of the Jews starting to go, yeah, maybe we should check Yeshua out a little bit more. And that's what we're really looking for. And that's our job. I mean, our main focus in evangelism should be the Jewish people. If we're trying to hasten the return of the Lord. Not to the exclusion of others, but certainly we've got to get the Jews saved. That means we've got to provoke them to jealousy. To the Jew first. That never changed. That's like Shabbat. It never changed. We changed it. And of course the enemy had his hands in that, and the Jewish people have become the least evangelized people group in the world today. Yeah, it's all of that enters in. It just gets crazier and crazier. Somebody's got to be the light. Somebody's got to be the voice that starts speaking it out.
Were the rabbis from Israel or were they?
Yeah, they were. Well, no, they were from all over the world. They were some sort of a council. And like I said, I did look up a few of them individually to try to find out were there any big names amongst them. I didn't recognize any of the names, but that's not saying anything because I really don't know that many Orthodox rabbis. But there's 25 of them from all over the world. He was talking about his return, though. Yeah. He appears to people in visions. But these guys didn't even say that he had appeared to them. No, I'm not saying that. No, 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 no.
But he has. It's some Arab, Arab people.
He has appeared to different people, Jews and Arabs alike. Right. But in the context of that quote, he was talking about I'm not coming back. You're not going to see my second coming until Israel is saying this. Yeah, it's not talking about individuals there. He makes guest appearances all the time. Yeah, you know what I mean? But not in mass. But you get 25, if you start getting chunks of 25 Orthodox rabbis at a time, that's going to start making an impact in the Jewish world. Because one thing that differs between Jews following their rabbis and Christians following their pastors, Jews actually do follow their rabbis. Christians don't. Christians only follow their pastors as long as they're comfortable. I've been in the ministry 40 years. I'm just telling you that's how it works. The minute you disagree with the pastor, I'm out of here. Jews don't do that as much. When they're zeroed in on a rabbi, if the rabbi is saying something, they're listening. So this is good for our cause. Don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Interesting. No, I haven't heard that. Okay. Yeah. 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 We have to. That's such a good point. We have to. Oh, that's very good. Yeah. Yeah. Ariel Cohen. I will. Interesting. Yeah. Well, we really have to, trying to get the Jews saved through Isaiah is a waste of time. They've been so conditioned. It's like trying to go to John 1:1 to deal with Jehovah's Witness. They're so conditioned to it that they can argue circles around you. Even if they're wrong, it doesn't even matter. You have to go in through the back door. And we have to start asking God to give us the right key. Like, don't try to convince him that he's the suffering Messiah of Isaiah. They've got all the answers for that. You've got to come in from different angles. When I talk to Jehovah's Witness, I go to Mark 16. I go, are you a believer? And they go, yes. And I said, do you speak in tongues? They say, no. Then according to Mark 16, you can't be a believer. And they don't know what to say. They short circuit. Now, I don't even believe you have to speak in tongues to be a believer. But it says right there, believers will speak in new tongues. And they're not prepared for that. And so right away, the argument just caves in on them. They don't convert, but they go home asking questions. We've got to start coming in through the back door, guys. We've been doing it for 2,000 years this way, and it's really not bearing very much fruit any longer. We do. And that's where we in the Messianic One New Man are more on the cutting edge than the church, because we've started to take on that mentality. We've got this healers coming on Saturday. You guys know about that? Nazir Iqbal. He's Turkish, and he came to us because he said, he's doing a work with the Muslims, and this is the second Muslim not Muslim, but the second Arab that's come to us that wants to plug into us, because when they get Muslims saved, they can't plug them into Christian churches, because the Christian church thinks in a Western mindset and has no concept, and they can't hold them. So he said, we're looking for Messianic congregations to plug these people into. So I did a 10-minute little video for just on blowing the shofar. It was nothing. I did it 5 minutes before an elders retreat. Of an elders meeting, and we sent it out, and it went to like 40 million Muslims. And they want more of these now. And the Muslims, it went viral, and it was a nothing teaching. I just talked off the top of my head. And then Nazir, who's coming Saturday, and by the way, bring your friends. He's very anointed for healing blind eyes and deaf ears. It's really where he shines, I guess. But very anointed. But Muslims are coming to faith because they see the power of God. But he said, I can't plug them into. He goes to the Rock. He used to go to the Rock Church. The what? What? Yeah, I don't care about that. you know better than that. We can cut that right out if we need to. Anyway, the point is, he needs to send these people to people that have started to take on a Hebraic mindset. Well, that's us. That's us. It's not the church. The church brings an Eastern person in, and the first thing I have to do is convert to Western thinking. And the problem is, our Messiah is Eastern thinking. The whole Bible is Eastern thinking. So we've really got to start coming in through that back door, if that makes sense. And we've been training for this, so let's do it. Amen? All right, so the land belongs to the Jews. There's just no question about that. And of course, even the church is starting to turn on that point. Even the church is feeling sorry for the Palestinians and thinking it's not right, and so on and so forth. But the Bible gave it to the descendants. Okay. In Roman numeral 3, Avraham Avinu, Abraham our father. Let's talk about this. Now, in letter A, Abraham is remade by God. Remade. I want you to go over to Genesis chapter 12. We're going to look at verse 2. This becomes very interesting. It says, I will make of you a great nation, I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. Now, the passage, this comes up in the Midrash, the passage does not say, and I will Natan, give you a nation, nor does it say, I will establish you a great nation, but instead it says, I will Asa, make you a great nation. We talked a lot about this word Asa when we were talking about creation. Remember that? To Asa is the English word to make, and it's to make something out of existing material. Okay, so you already have an existing thing, and you rework it, and that's Asa. Okay? He says, I will make you a great nation. That is to say, only after I have or recreated you as a new creation will you be fruitful and multiply. Now that's interesting, isn't it? This is from the Genesis Rabbah 39:11. Okay. Now it goes on to say the rabbis suspect that God must have had a reason for using the verb make rather than any of the other possible verbs he could have used. The suggestion is that God's choice of words was meant to convey that Abraham would become a great nation only after he was remade by God. It was as if God said to Avram, I will make you a great nation. That is, after I have created you as a new creation, you will be fruitful, and then you will multiply. Now, this is the whole essence of being born again, isn't it? It's a remaking. When you were born again, when I was born again, there was an old Bruce. God didn't get rid of the old Bruce and create a new Bruce. He took the old Bruce and reworked him, and in fact has been reworking him for the last 40 plus years. Right? That's how it works. And that's what we call born again and the sanctification process. How many know it would have been easier for everybody if he'd snapped his fingers and I just took on the image of Messiah right there on the spot? It seems like it would have even been a much more powerful evangelistic tool. Here I am and here I am now, and wow. People go, wow, what happened? But this is a lifetime process. And in the lifetime process, a lot of people in your life don't even get to see the whole process, do they? They only see bits and portions of it. And sometimes the portion they see is so minimal, so small, they don't even see the changes. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you didn't know me before I got saved, you can only hear the stories. You can't know the change that took place. People say, man, you got a long ways to go. Yeah, but you should see how far I've come. You know what I mean? I'm nothing like I used to be. Nothing. And do we still have some rough edges? Yeah, we still have some rough edges, but nothing like it used to be.
When you said, have you done a word study on he'll give you a new heart? Is that a remake?
I haven't done a study on that, but I would guess that it is. I don't think it's an instantaneous bara. I think it's an asa, to make, and it's what we call the process of sanctification. It's a lifetime process. Yeah, and Torah is still being written on it. You see, it's not like you got saved and Torah was written on your heart. I mean, let's face it, some of Torah was written on your heart before you got saved. I mean, isn't it true? When I was doing all my worldly stuff before I knew the Lord, I knew it was wrong to do it. I just didn't care. Right? We knew it was wrong to steal, and it was wrong to curse, and it was wrong to do all these things. We just didn't care. But how did we know it was wrong? It was written on our hearts, even before we were believers. So it's not like, well, you say the sinner's prayer, you come to faith, and now all of a sudden the Torah is all written on your heart, and it's all finished. I don't believe that. I think it's being written as we speak, and I believe it's going to take at least a lifetime, maybe more. I'm not convinced that I'm even going to have it all when I die and go to the kingdom. I'm kind of suspect that it's going to take a lot more time even than that.
Yeah, we're going to be learning.
I mean, we're being conformed in the image of Messiah himself. How far away are you from being in his image? I mean, think about that. I've had 40 years. I'm still not real impressive. I don't impress myself. Yeah, right? I mean, can you imagine if Yeshua was standing right here in the flesh and we were comparing? I'm not measuring up the way I would like to. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, first off, if he was right here, I would be right there in that seat. I wouldn't be here. You can, yeah. He's still working with us. And I suspect that's going to go on. Listen, how long have the angels been here? We don't even know. And they're still learning. As he deals with us, they're going, whoa, did you see that, Fred? What a mind blower. It's probably an angel named Fred somewhere, right? It's pretty scary. So anyway, Abraham is remade. Now this is God's MO. This is what he did with us. He remade us. He's in the process of remaking us. I know that it says you're a new creature in the Lord, and that is absolutely true. But that work is not completed the day you say the sinner's prayer. In fact, it's really just beginning. Salvation is the beginning of our walk with God. It's not the end all. It's the beginning. And it seems like the further I go, it seems like the further I am away. Because the more clearly you see him, the more clearly you see yourself. You realize, I was more impressed with myself when I was in seminary. You know, we couldn't figure out why they hadn't gotten the whole world saved, and we could just get on with it. What have you guys been doing? Sleeping for 2,000 years? We're going to charge and take the world now. Well, that didn't happen.
I always say you have to walk sideways down the path. Because you can see how far you've come.
You know, that's good.
How far you have to go. So
That's good. I like that. It's very good. Yeah, walk sideways. All right, B. Let's go over to Genesis 12:4 and 5. So Abram went, as Adonai had said to him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, his brother's son Lot, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, as well as the people they had acquired in Haran. Then they set out for the land of Canaan and entered the land of Canaan. Okay, now, what's interesting about this is in letter B, Abraham is the first missionary on the Bible pages. And why do we say this? It comes from this same word, asa, to remake. So where it says, as well as the people he had acquired in Haran, the word there is asa. These are the people that he had made in Haran. These are the people that he brought to faith. This is how the rabbis view it, and this is really the way the Hebrew spells it out. These were not acquired servants. These were disciples. He said, you know what, guys? I've heard from this God, and he's told me to go west. Go west, young man. Go west. And I'm going to go, and I want to tell you about this God. He is awesome, and people came to faith. And these are the people that he had acquired. He had gathered, well, by the time he gets there and he has to go rescue Lot, he's got, 325 warriors. So he's acquired quite a few people. He has led to faith. They have no books. They have no nothing, no scrolls. But he has evangelized. He has brought them to faith, and they have been remade as well. And they too now share that same faith. It's the faith in the God of Abraham. They don't even know what else to call him at this point. Pretty interesting. So you can see what's happening. Remember, God's always been dealing with individuals. Now he's using Abraham to raise up a people group, a nation. And it starts small, but it's growing. By the time they get to Mount Sinai, it's in the millions. It's in the millions. And by the time you get there, you've got 12 tribes. It's pretty well established. It's a force to be contended with. See? At this point in time, it's really, you know, it's bare bones. I mean, an army of 325 is not overly impressive. You know what I mean? Although by the it's what? He came against the five kings, and they were city kings, so they probably had 300-400 people each. Um, so I mean, he won a great victory. There's no doubt. He was, you didn't fool around with him. I mean, he wasn't this old man walking around leaning on his staff trying to stand up straight. This guy said, you know what, they've got my nephew. We're going to go and kick a little rear end here. That's what he said. He was a fierce warrior. Moshe was a fierce warrior. Uh, Joshua, David, all of these guys were, boy, even Messiah. He went in and overturned the tables. No one hassled him. No one. Can you? That's like go down to your local swap meet this weekend and turn over all the tables and see what happens. You better look so fierce when it happens that no one even wants to get near you. They've got to see something in you and they go, ooh, I don't know if this guy's crazy or what, but I'm not getting near him because he's scary. I think that's how the Lord was. The Lord is a fierce warrior, and of course he's coming back as a warrior. He's not coming back as the lamb. He's coming back as a conquering the Lion of Judah, and he's coming back covered in blood. This is not a pretty picture. This is going to kind of destroy some people's idea of sweet Jesus. You know what I'm saying? He's not meek and mild. He's a force to be contended with. Yeah. Power under control. And boy, does he have power. So anyway, so we see here that Abraham's the first missionary. Then, and again, this in C, these people, again, are grafted in through you. It's that same thing that I just shared with you, that same thought, okay, about the grafting. Same wording, exactly. Okay? Now, let's go to Roman numeral 4. You guys are in trouble tonight. I keep looking at my watch. It's only 6:15. It stopped on me the other day. Okay. Yeah, let's go over to Genesis 14:18. Genesis 14:18. Melchizedek, king of Shalem, brought out bread and wine and was Cohen of El Elyon. Remember how I was sharing the other day in one of the teachings I was doing? You know what? It might have been at Sukkot camp that one of the names for Yeshua was El Elyon. That when I discovered that was really kind of exciting because I'd never seen that before. And of course, El Elyon is God Most High. The captain of the host, the captain of the army. It's a warrior posture, a position. Okay, so general. So he was the Cohen of El Elyon. Okay, in 19. So he blessed him with these words: "Blessed be Avram by El Elyon." So El Elyon blesses him, maker of heaven and earth. And blessed be El Elyon. Remember now the promises were made to whom? Both Abraham and El Elyon. And the Lord. So, and blessed be El Elyon who handed your enemies over to you. So El Elyon, presumably Yeshua, is blessing Abraham and blessing himself. Okay, now why would he be doing this? Because he's preparing to go into covenant. We're going to start in not this Shabbat, but the following Shabbat. We're going to actually start our series on unity, Echad, and I'm pretty excited about it. The Lord's given me all kinds of good stuff, and we're going to be talking about not just unity, because there's a difference between being unified and being one, and we're going to talk about those differences, because we have to be unified in order to become one. You can't become one unless you're unified, but you could become unified and stay there and not be one. Okay? So God is getting ready here. The Lord is getting ready to enter into a covenant in the very next chapter with Abraham. So he blesses Abraham and he blesses himself. He's putting them really both on this even keel, if you will, where they are going to go into this covenant equally. All right? And of course, we know that that really doesn't transpire in the end analysis, but nevertheless. So he says, and blessed be El Elyon, who handed your enemies over to you. Avram gave him a tenth of everything. Okay? Then, let's see here. How far do I want to go? I want to go right there. That's good. Okay. Now, in Roman numeral 4, Melchizedek, it means the king of righteousness. Melchi is king, and no, 4, the king of righteousness. Yeah, Roman numeral 4, king of righteousness. Okay, and actually, let's go over to Hebrews for a minute. He's the king of righteousness, and of course, who is that? We understand that now to be Yeshua. Do you think Abraham understood that? I don't. In fact, he's never even heard of Yeshua. He knows him as El Elyon and Melchizedek. Okay? So when we go over to Hebrews now, Hebrews 6:19, we're going to read 6:19 through 7:3. It says, we have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Yeshua has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Okay? So right away we know that Yeshua is the high priest of the order of Melchizedek. Okay? 7:1. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, El Elyon, met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. So Melchizedek blessed Abraham, not the other way around. And to him, Abraham apportioned a tenth part of everything. He is first, by translation of his name, king of righteousness, and then he is also king of Salem, which is king of peace. He is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. Now, I don't know if you've ever taken really some time to think about this. I've thought about this a lot. Salem was a real city, which means they had people living there and they had a king. He's not just an apparition here. Is he really the king of Salem? Was he dwelling on earth for a period of time? A human lifetime, maybe? I'm just asking questions. I'm not professing to have any answers here. But it's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes we read this and we get the idea that Melchizedek just shows up as this apparition. He blesses Abraham. Abraham blesses him. Abraham gives him the tenth, and then he kind of just poof, he goes away. And we don't read about him again until Hebrews. But this is a real city with real people, and they had a king. And apparently, They understood that he was the king of this city. Just something to ponder.
Throw a little wrench in the
Go ahead.
It doesn't. Okay, well, in Jasher it says it's Shem, the king of Salem is Shem, which doesn't take away Yeshua being in the line of
Right.
Melchizedek.
Right.
It could be that it was Shem, and he was the king, and well, and then I was just thinking about something else too, that he had established that territory that later on was taken away by the Canaanites. Anyway, that's something.
Yeah, Shem enters into Jewish folklore often. Now, whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. It's a thought. And Jasher, I'm not sure Jasher actually says it Shem or relates it to Shem. Do you? Okay. So, who knows? Now, I have a regard for the book of Jasher, the book of Enoch, and some of the other books that are mentioned in the Word because the Word seems to give them a credence. They are not canonized, however. So you have to be extremely careful with them because God is very jealous over His Word, and I personally believe the Word that we possess today is the Word.
Right.
Now, I own both Jasher and Enoch, and I refer to them, and I don't study them because I don't have enough time to study this. So I don't study them per se, but I do refer to them, and I look at them and go into them for different resources and so on and so forth. Whether or not they're 100% accurate or not, I don't know. But Shem comes up a lot in these early goings of Genesis. And Shem is often referred to as being Melchizedek. There are certain problems with that from our understanding. One being Melchizedek is the high priest of the order of Melchizedek. Correct? No beginning or end. That's another. These are all problematic issues.
That could be. They could be saying that because there is in the scripture there is no beginning or end, even though Shem might have had one. There's no
Yeah.
documentation.
Yeah.
So that's one thing too.
Yeah. There's so many variables. We know virtually nothing about Melchizedek. We believe that he's the high priest of the order of the priesthood of Melchizedek because it pretty much says that. But it could be a title. We have no job description for that priesthood. We always say, well, we're of the priesthood of Melchizedek. Well, I do believe that myself. But what's our job? Because there's absolutely no job description anywhere in the Word telling us.
Receiving tithes.
I like it. There's no job description. Like with the Aaronic priesthood, there's a whole job description. I personally believe, and if Yeshua is the high priest, and I personally believe the Aaronic priesthood is coming back into function when the temple is rebuilt in the millennial reign. So I personally believe we're going to have these two priesthoods working side by side. What does that look like? I don't have a clue. Why don't I have a clue? Because it doesn't say anything about it. It is virtually Melchizedek's only mentioned 4 times in the entire Word of God, and it's never in any kind of depth. It's, well, he has no father, no mother. What the heck does that mean? You know what I mean? He's the king of Salem. There's no record. There's nothing. But he's the priest forever. So it really leaves us in the lurch.
I think Enoch, the book of Enoch and Jasher and Movies and all those, just are
Yeah, that's what I think too. That's the way I lean mostly. Um, and it does do that. I mean, you get into Enoch and you find out a lot about the fallen angels that the word just doesn't talk about. Now, is it all correct? Who knows? Yeah,
Even within the book.
There seems to
there
be
is.
more credibility in Enoch than it should have been part of canon scripture and why it was. But anyway,
Yeah, but you start saying should have, and then you open up a whole can of worms there because a lot of people don't believe Hebrew should even be in there.
I don't know if it should,
So
but it is a book for the end time. So
yeah,
maybe it was sealed until the end.
but Yeshua,
yeah.
Well, you can to get clarification.
You can for clarification because the word does give them credence. It no, no, and that's why I said don't take a lot of time studying those books. I own them and I do read out of them, but I don't study them. And there's a huge difference in that. Study what the word is. If we can use that like like you would read a commentary to fill in maybe some blanks or give you a little fresh thought on something, that's fine. But you always have to remember they are not canonized Bible. And I personally have to believe that God looked out. I mean, I believe Constantine put the New Testament together. I don't even think he was a believer, personally. And yet, I believe the New Testament is exactly what God wanted. So he uses, in my opinion, this heathen to put together the New Testament. But I think God's jealous over his word. He protects it. He watches over it. And I don't think we have to worry. It doesn't matter whether Constantine knew him or not. Constantine was used by God, even if he didn't know it. So I think that so I believe the word we've got is the word. Does that make sense? You can fill in some of the blanks, theoretically fill them in. Whether it's right or not, it can kind of fill in some of the gaps and give you some sense of understanding. But even when you read about the fallen angels in Enoch, it gives you some understanding here and raises more questions here at the same time. You know what I mean? So it becomes very difficult to go with this. So anyway, Melchizedek, he's the king of righteousness. In A, he's the king of Salem. In B, Yeshua is the high priest. I believe Yeshua is a theophany. Or let me reword that. Melchizedek is a theophany of Yeshua. And probably not even Yeshua is probably not even the right term. The right term would be he's a theophany of the second person of the Godhead. That probably is theologically more correct. Because the second person of the Godhead can appear in many different forms. If he appears here as Melchizedek, how many know Melchizedek's not the same as Yeshua? Does that make sense? And I didn't say I believe that. I say I threw that out to chew on. Because Salem was a real city with real inhabitants, and they had a city king. I understand that. But I'm just saying, Melchizedek lives in the neighborhood. It's like we've got a mayor here you got a mayor here in Temecula somewhere, right? You must have. Okay, well he's the real mayor, right? He's the mayor of this city. So what if we were saying, well, he is really Yeshua? You go, well, how does that work? Because this is a real guy. This isn't just Yeshua coming out of the clouds and showing up for the occasion and then disappearing. This guy's here for a lifetime. I tend to agree with that. I'm just throwing out the converse. Something to think on. This is a midrash. He's the king of Salem. He's the king of Salem.
It's not a name, it's a title.
No, it's a title. It's a title.
His name is
But that wouldn't even matter. It's just like you call the president Mr. President. A lot of people call me pastor. They never even say Bruce, just pastor, and I answer to it because that's become. It is a title, but it's even to some degree replaced the name. You know, pastor, I answer to it. I mean, it's not like I've got to think, who are we talking about here?
term of respect.
It's a term of respect. Yeah, technically it's a title. There's no doubt about that. But it transfers into more even than a title. It becomes your identity, if you will. So Melchizedek literally means the king of righteousness. But his position is he's literally the king of Salem.
Which is that Jerusalem?
Well,
Debating that. I think it's black and white.
and don't hear me wrong, I'm not teaching that. Well, Salem was a real place. Salem was Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Well, I understand that. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing out that idea. This is something I've kind of kicked around for years. I don't teach this. I don't teach this as being truth or some new revelation or something. No, I'm just throwing out. I've always pondered this because there really was a king of this city. I mean, historically, that's just how it was. So, was he that king? That's all I'm saying. Just something to. It's a mind blower. Well, we know that city kings were what was happening during this time. In fact, there's much evidence that Noah was a city king over Uduric, or what was the name of the town he lived in? Yeah, that he was a city king. He was literally the king of this city. That's pretty well established. So this is how they operated. They had city kings, city armies. That's why their armies were about 300-400 people strong. That's why when Israel came in and the people in Jericho saw 6 million people across the river, they freaked out. They had an army of a few hundred at best. That would freak you right out of your mind. There was no army in the world that could stand against them at that point because it was this whole people group. Yeah, I think they freaked out over the giants. Well, we would be saying, "You first, Scott. Go and smash his big toe, and then we'll come in after you." I mean,
We'll send you while he's busy with you.
and look, and these are yeah, but see, if you get into the book of Enoch, Enoch says that some of these giants were 3,000 ells high, tall. An L is 18 inches. That's 450 feet tall.
Well, not only that, but
I mean, this is giant. And they were cannibals. Well, I was sharing in our study on creation, the American Indians. The American Indians. We always have how they would show their hand to make sure that there was 5 fingers, that not 6. That's how they knew that they were dealing with a human and not a Nephilim. And there's some substantial evidence that this is what brought this about. But they write, this was in Buffalo Bill Cody's diary, that the Pawnee Indians had legends about giant that would run across the prairie and grab buffalo under their arms and rip their legs off and eat it while they were running. These are the Pawnee American Indians. Just over in Catalina, we have unearthed an entire colony of blonde-haired giants over on Catalina Island. These things were real. They were you had to reckon with these things. And if they were, 450 feet high, think about that one. I mean, even 36, we have skeletons of 36-footers. 36 feet is, a telephone pole is 40 feet.
Well, you have
That's big.
mountains in Utah that are in the form of a tree stump.
Yeah.
Because they say they used to be a tree stump.
Yeah.
And now it's a huge mountain.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how we got on that, but it's a midrash. That's how you get on it, right? Okay, let's move on. So, I believe Yeshua in B is the high priest over this order. That's my personal belief. High priest of this order. And in C, I believe that you and I are of this order. We're a royal priesthood, right? And I believe you're not of the Aaronic priesthood unless you're of the tribe of Levi. You can't be in the Aaronic priesthood unless you're from Levi. So that rules most of us in this room out. So, and specifically Aaron, not even Levi, but you can't even be in the priesthood in general unless you're from Levi, right? So,
And I can't be anyway.
why not? Oh yeah, right, yeah. Neener, neener, neener. But yeah, but we are of the priesthood, I believe, of Melchizedek. Yeshua being our high priest. Okay? Now, as Scott said earlier, there's so little information on Melchizedek and what's so ironic is there's so many people in the Messianic that try to build these huge dogmas out of Melchizedek. It makes me crazy.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
They're always after me. What about Melchizedek? I go, what about him? What do you want me to say? I can give you all the scriptures there where he's listed.
I mean, how can you build a dogma out of 4 places?
I believe in the Melchizedek priesthood. I believe that we are going to actually serve in the Melchizedek priesthood to some degree. And I believe Yeshua is the high priest over the Melchizedek priesthood. Beyond that, I know nothing about the Melchizedek priesthood. And neither does anybody else. It's there. We have to deal with it. But really, we're clueless on what it's all about. I mean, even this, was he even a real guy? There's a lot of questions about Melchizedek. You know what I mean? But it's interesting because this high priest of the final order, if I can put it that way, meets with the first father of that order. To me, that's what's important. So you have the beginning and the end right here. Boom. We don't understand it, but it's there. And I think it's powerful, although we don't know much about it. But we will find out in due time. But he's dealing with El Elyon on top of it. That's a whole other thing. He's Melchizedek. He's the king of Salem. He's El Elyon. He's the king of peace here. All these things are listed. And I mean, is Abraham dealing with a real person, real flesh and blood, or is he dealing with a figment of his imagination or a phantom, or vision or what? You know, I mean, I think it was pretty real to him. He gives him a tenth. I mean, how do you give a tenth of everything you own to a phantom? Just, that doesn't make sense to me. I think he gave it, and I think he took it. Oh, well, then what did he do with it? I don't know. If he was a real king, I suppose he took it back. If not, I suppose he just threw it in the ravine somewhere, and it's hidden treasure. All right. Okay, so we are of this order. Now, in Roman numeral 5, let's talk about the Abrahamic covenant for a minute. We find this in chapter 15, and we're not going to, Genesis, we won't read this because we're almost out of time here. But and by the way, you can find references to Melchizedek in Psalm 76:2 and also 110:4. 76:2 and 110:4 also are reference Melchizedek. It's 110, Psalm 110:4 and Psalm 76:2. And then Genesis and Hebrews, and that's it. That's all you get. That's all she wrote right there. And much of it, like Hebrews, is really just a reiteration. It's not a new story. It's a reiteration of Genesis. So it's just a recap. So it's not even new material. Okay. So back in Genesis 15. Now this becomes the covenant. So God speaks 8 promises to Abraham. That's where we started tonight. Abraham, being a man, being flesh and blood, he says, well, how do I know this is going to happen? Legitimate question. We've all made that question. We wish we didn't have to make it, but that's who we are. Lord, I believe you, but help me in my unbelief, right? And that's where Abraham is at. And like I said, he was at a real disadvantage because he didn't have any of the stories that we rely on to really build up our faith. He really was going kind of flying blind here in so many ways. And that's what made him so great. And that faith was reckoned to him as righteousness. See? He just had that faith that it took. Okay, so the Abrahamic covenant in Roman numeral 5. Let's read. Let's read it here, verse 8, starting in verse 8, chapter 15. He replied, Adonai God, how am I to know that I will possess it? He answered him, bring me a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a dove, and a young pigeon. He brought him all these. If you ever wondered where did he even find these? He's in the middle of the desert. Did he have to go searching for these things and come back like the next day with all the animals? I always ask these kind of questions, you know what I mean? Well, he could have just gone into town and bought them too. I don't know. But I just kind of put myself in the story when I read, and I ask these kinds of questions. That's just how I think. And I go, okay, here I am talking to you. I'm in the middle of the desert here. How do I even know if it's a 3-year-old cow? How do you know that? Well, obviously he knew something that I don't know. Ask the cow. Yeah, right. Yeah, how old are you anyway? I know. A dove and a young pigeon. I mean, a female goat. That's a little weird. Okay. He brought him all these, cut the animals in two, and placed the pieces opposite each other, but he didn't cut the birds in half. Okay? Well, because they didn't do the birds. They broke the neck of the birds. They stretched out their wings and broke their neck, and it really becomes a picture of the Messiah on the cross. Their head falls down on their chest, and their wings are spread. But this is how they did the birds. They broke the neck and stretched out the wings. Um, Now, we don't know even when all of that started. We know that Abel and Cain did sacrificing. We know that. But how did they learn all this? I think this is what God talked to Adam in the garden about, was these different things, and then he passed it down. That's all we can think, right? But anyway, he's got a pretty good grasp on how it's all done and what needs to take place. The birds of prey swoop down on the carcasses. Birds of prey in the Bible are always a picture of Satan. Okay, Satan coming in to try to steal the blessing that's about to happen. Okay, but Avram drove them away. Now this is interesting because Avram, although he is kind of part of this covenant, is going to end up not being involved in the covenant at all, and yet it is his responsibility to chase the birds away. Can you imagine if he'd allowed the birds to come and steal away the offerings here? So there's a lesson in that for us. We may not know what's going on, but we do need to fight the good fight of faith, even when we don't understand all the particulars. And we got to chase the birds away, chase the devil away. That's our job. That's what we're to do. So as the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell on Avram, and the Hebrew there literally says he fell into a trance. This wasn't just he took too much sleepies. This was this was a trance that he fell into. Horror and great darkness came over him. Now, it's what? Yeah, Hosek. That's the word for darkness, Hosek, and it means literally darkness that can be felt. In fact, yeah, just like in the Passover. In fact, Hosek is created. Hosek is not the absence of light. Hosek is a created thing. Interesting. In the scriptures where it says, I created light and I created darkness, I created Hosek. It's CHO. Yeah, Hosek. No, this is Hosek. This is that kind of darkness that just causes the hair to stand up on the back of your neck. It's a presence. It's the presence of evil and darkness. Remember, the birds are swooping in. He's chasing them away, but he goes into a trance, and then this great horror. Now, what's so interesting about this is he's entering into a covenant with the living God. And yet there's all of this going on at the same time. What a lesson for us. God can be doing great things in our lives, and everything is not a bed of roses. And sometimes we try to oversimplify things. We go, well, if God is in it, he just opens the doors and everything goes smooth. Well, that's not true. Sometimes you got to fight your way through the whole thing, and it's still God. Sometimes you don't even fight your way through it at all, and it's not God. There's no one size fits all. I wish there were. It'd make it a little easier. But here is Abraham. He's just met face to face with Melchizedek. Here he is. He's entering into a covenant with Adonai God. Now, is God on the scene physically? Is Melchizedek still there on the scene? Or is Abraham hearing this in his mind, and he thinks the Lord is telling him, this is how you're going to know you're going to possess it. Get me the animals. We don't know the story. We don't know what's happening really, or how long. But if you put yourself in the way the Lord is the same yesterday, today, and forever, right? So if God is dealing with Abraham the way he deals with me, Abraham is probably a little unsure of all of this. It's like, okay, I think this is what you're asking of me. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it as faithfully as I can. See, sometimes we just think God is just standing there and everything's crystal clear, and Abraham is just, yes, sir, right now, I'll do it. Well, I think it's a little more complex than that. I think Abraham is being tested to the very core. He falls into this trance. can you imagine? He falls into this place of horror and great darkness. That kind of darkness you can feel comes over him. Uh, that's a nightmare. That's what that is. That's a nightmare. Taking a scary one too, I might add. So this is not all peaches and cream. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. It's and a lot of times when God works with us, it's not peaches and cream. It's downright scary. I used to rejoice whenever a prophet would come into town and we get words. I thought, yeah, whoa, that's an awesome word. We're going to grow and we're going to do this and I'm going to be wealthy and whatever the word was. And then I matured a little bit and I realized to get to that word, you had to go through hell. Whoa. Now when the prophets come, I go, "Hi, Lord, I don't really need a word tonight. I'm doing pretty good. Give it to the new guy." You know what I'm saying? I mean, do you guys think that, or am I the only nut here? I believe that's what God is going to do, but what is it going to take to get there? That concerns me. That concerns me as a human being, as a man, as a father, as a husband. What's my family going to need to go through? What is the cost here? I've learned there's always a cost. And I'm thinking, whoa. Because I am a man of faith, and because you're people of faith, we normally choose to do it. That is faith. You go, I don't know what's laying in store for me, but I'm going, Lord. And you know my favorite prayer, be gentle. That's my favorite prayer. Be gentle. Do what you have to do, but be gentle. Because I'm freaked out. I want what God has, but I'm a little apprehensive about it. That's because of experience. The what? It's kind of the same. I used to tell our dentist, if you hurt me, I'm going to bite you. That's literally what I would tell him. I told him that. If you hurt me, I'm going to bite you. And he knew I was serious. They used to give me the shots and the gas. That's because when I was in the Navy, I was submarine qualified, so all my teeth had to be perfect. And the Navy dentists were like barbarians. They give you the shot and they start drilling like 2 seconds later. Yeah, it was kind of very similar. And I got such a fear of dentists, I was terrified of dentists. It's another story. Okay. All right. So the sun was about to set. Deep sleep falls on Avraham. Horror and great darkness came over him. Adonai said to Avram, now he's in a deep trance here. So this is obviously like we would experience a dream, right? Does that make sense? So how many times have you ever gotten awoken from a dream you don't even know if it was real or not? You're not even sure what transpired. You go, whoa, that was kind of weird. I know. So here, Abraham is in a deep trance. So he's out. He's out for the count. Adonai speaks to him. So I can only imagine this is much like I've experienced in dreams. Know this for certain, he says. Your descendants will be foreigners in a land that is not yours. The question was, how do I know you're going to bless me? That was the question. And this is, you know what I mean? How do I know that I'm going to possess it? And he says, well, forget about that stuff, Av. Let's talk about what I want to talk about. Know for certain your descendants are going to be foreigners in a land that's not theirs. They will be slaves and held in oppression there for 400 years. So far, the question hasn't been answered. This has only created more. More questions. Now, the reason we have this is because we deal with these same things. God does not always answer our questions yes or no. Sometimes our questions aren't even on course. So he brings us back on course. He goes, what are you talking about? This is what I'm doing. Yeah, but I want to know about this. Right? And he brings us over here. And it's as if he doesn't even answer us. And so we go away kind of confused, and we go, well, he's not even answering me. Well, he is answering. He's just doing something different than what you had thought, what you were hoping for. Right? I mean, he's had 8 promises. They're all really good promises. You're going to be a great nation. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make your name great. You're going to have a great name. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless those that bless you. Anybody that comes against you, they're toast. All the families in the world are going to be blessed through you, and your descendants are going to have this land. How do I know this is going to happen? Well, those are all good things. Tell me some more. I want to hear more. This is good. God says, okay, your descendants are going to be slaves for 400 years.
Never mind, I don't want to know.
Now, just apply this to your life. Apply this to your life. But I will also judge that nation. You don't even care, though. 400 years, you're going to be dead and gone. What do you care? Gee, Lord, I'm talking about making me a great nation. Making my name great. I'm going to be famous. You know? I will judge the nation, the one that makes them slaves. Afterwards, they will leave with many possessions. That doesn't do Abraham any good, does it? I don't know. It does.
He's taking care of Lot, his nephew. He didn't leave until Terah,
It does. But if God says to me, I'm going to bless you, I'm thinking,
not my children, not my grandchildren, not my
bless me and I'll leave it to them. He said, no, 400 years from now, they're going to get it. How's that a blessing? Just kind of weird, isn't it?
I mean, there's been the expectation since Yeshua died, buried, rose again. There's been the expectation that he's coming back real soon. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
do you think there was expectation with Abraham and that time period that somehow the Garden of Eden was going to be restored before 400 years and all this was going to happen? Do you think they had some kind of expectation?
Well, I think that's very possible. I mean, Eve thought, it's pretty conclusive that Eve felt that Seth was the Messiah. That's pretty conclusive. Yeah, so she felt like Messiah was coming then. Every generation has had that same. That's something God puts in us. That's like the carrot that's put in front of us to keep us going.
So be told that in 400 years things are still going to be a mess would be even more of a deflate.
Well, he realizes, yeah, if he was looking for the coming of the Lord in his own lifetime, he realizes now it's not going to happen. I mean, where would we be? Our generation, I mean, we're really amped out about the coming of the Lord, right? Where would we be? Well, we heard of a Baptist pastor that said if the rapture doesn't happen, I'm going to give up on Christ.
Well, it's going to happen. That's what it says. The falling away.
You see, yeah. No, just pre-trib rapture. But you see, we're so amped out for the Lord to return now, and one of the reasons there is a falling away is because people are getting tired of waiting.
So what if we were told in 400 years?
Well, I'm of the personal opinion you need to live your life like you're going to die of old age. To me, that's the best way to live life. I quit seminary because the Lord was going to come back before I could graduate, and I had to hit the streets and start getting people saved. So I quit my schooling. When my oldest son, who is now how old? 42. I had a dream one night. I was sure it was from the Lord that my oldest son was going to walk and talk at about 2 months old because there was no time for him to grow up and he was going to be a prophet. Now, at the time, I could have sworn that was the Lord spoke to me. Obviously, it wasn't. I sat under a pastor who kept saying 1981, 1981, 1981, where is the rapture, rapture, rapture. you know, uh, well, we didn't hold to that one so much, but we were the 81 folks. And it didn't happen. And here we are, and I'm even looking at people, well, in 1948, Israel got back the land. Well, you know what? They didn't get the. If you read the last chapter, the last verses in 15, the territory of the Kenai, the Kenizzites, the Kedmoni, the Hittite, all of these people, this extends all the way to the river Euphrates. Israel doesn't control any of that. So they don't even have the land that they was promised. So does 1948 even count? I'm just asking questions. Yeah, they became a new state in 1948, but it's not the land that was promised. And they still don't have that land. So are we even on the time clock yet? I don't know. I hope we are. If we're going to vote, I'll vote for it, yeah. But somehow I've kind of realized this is not a voting situation. God's got his plan. So I'm thinking, you know what? Let's not get too excited about planets coming and crashing with the earth. Who cares? If it happens, you're going to be with the Lord. And you win. You and I can't lose. You and I cannot lose. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't. So let's not even worry about it. It's ridiculous to get all excited about this planet and this constellation and this volcano, and who cares? Let's learn how to walk with God so that when he does get here, we can actually keep pace with him. That's kind of where I come from, you know what I mean? And I want him to come back as much as the next guy, but on the other hand, we're not ready for the return of the Lord. I'm a pastor, and the church isn't even ready for the return of the Lord, never mind society. My kids aren't ready for the coming of the Lord. I'm not even ready for the coming of the Lord. No one's ready. So do we really want him to come back tonight? I don't think that's smart. See, because when we think about the Lord returning, we kind of hear the sound of the shofar and the angel voices singing and the nice sunset, 3 crosses on a hill over here, and everything's perfect. We don't see the horror and the great darkness. But that's all part of it. The third of the population is going to be killed in war. Another quarter in famine and pestilence. Do you realize that means every family here is going to lose somebody, or more than one? How anxious are we for this? I'm not that anxious for it. I'm really at a place in my life. I'd rather live a long, fruitful life and die in my sleep. And same with my children and my grandchildren. You see what I'm saying? I'm not sure I'm all excited about Armageddon. I don't think it's going to be fun. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think believers, we're going to have to clean out our drawers when it's all done. Quite honestly. I think it's going to freak us out. To be afraid? I think we need to be walking with God when he returns. Yeah. But that is our walk. It's manifest in our walk. If you love me, you keep my commandments. So in other words, if you love me, you're actually walking with me. Most of the church, so many in the church are not walking with God. It. I can probably guarantee that everybody in the church, if they knew the Lord was coming tonight at 11:30, they would change their walk right now. We're not ready. I don't even want to go there, Scott. That just freaks me right out.
Try being a teacher of all these little.
You see, are they ready? They're not ready. These are God's people. These are the people that Kathleen and I have given our whole adult life to serving and trying to help walk with the Lord. And I'm here to tell you tonight, the church is not ready for the return of Messiah. It freaks. I hear people in the church, oh, come Lord, quickly. And I'm going, no, not yet, not yet. Yeah, I mean, it's frightening to me, and we see this. Here God is working with the father of the faith. He's answering, he's showing Abraham how he's guaranteeing these 8 promises are going to come to pass, and it's a horrifying word. This is how you're going to know my word is my word, and it's going to scare the daylights out of you. That's the point I'm making. See, it's not we're just driving along and zip, we're raptured out of here. Oh my, yeah, and that's where we all grew up in the faith, right? You know, hey, if one day I'm just gone, I wish you were with me, but you're going to have to go through all the garbage, but I'm going to be up there looking down on you. You know, that's not what it's going to be. Here's Abraham, the father, and he's in great horror. Let's move on. Adonai said to Avram, know this for certain. Oh, we read that. He says, but I will judge that nation. Okay, big deal. All right. I mean, honestly, do you even care about that, really? You know, whatever. You know, yeah, you're going to judge them. But as for you, okay, now we're getting to the good part. As for you, Abraham, you will join your ancestors in peace, and you'll be buried at a good old age. As for you, Abe, you're dying. Lord, you still haven't answered. How do I know about the 8 promises? He hasn't even answered. He hasn't even touched on it. You see the issue here? We've got to know, but God is answering, obviously. How did he ever stick with the whole thing after this? I mean, Abraham was quite a guy. Where else can I go? He says, only in the 4th generation will your descendants come back here. Because only then will the Emorite be ripe for punishment. So in other words, I'm not even bringing them back here because they're only coming back in 4 generations because that's when these guys deserve their punishment. This is kind of a weird answer. You know what I mean? After the sun had set and there was a thick darkness, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch appeared which passed between these animal parts. Now Abraham's in the corner snoozing. That day Adonai made a covenant with Abraham. This is what's so exciting. Adonai makes the covenant. Abraham does not make the covenant. Yeah. Now what's so exciting we just did a Jewish wedding. Every wedding we do these days is a Jewish wedding, but there was one on Saturday in our congregation. And the interesting thing with the Jewish wedding is the bridegroom shares the ketubah, reads the ketubah to the bride-to-be, and the ketubah is his list of promises. This is what I promised to do for you, and this is what I'm going to do. In the Jewish wedding, the bride never makes a single promise to the bridegroom. This is a picture of Abraham. He doesn't make one promise. He doesn't make one oath in this covenant. He's knocked out in the corner. Now that's a powerful picture, because you don't make promises to the Lord. You're not even capable of keeping a promise that you do make. Think about it. I mean, how many promises have we kept? Really? You know, we don't keep promises that we make very. Maybe once in a while we make a little one. You know, I'll call you at 5. we can keep that one, but serious things, God doesn't rely on us. He knows better. He goes, listen, you sleep. I'm going to make the promises because I know my word is true. Your word, very iffy at best, right? So here he makes this covenant, and what we see in this covenant, as the torch and the flame pass through, okay, Abraham's in the corner, and as he's making this covenant, that day Adonai made a covenant with Abram, and here's what he says: I have given this land to your descendants. From the Wadi in Egypt, that's basically the Nile River, to the great river, the Euphrates, and everything in between it. And Israel, the nation of Israel, by the way, if anyone's interested, we're going to go to Israel coming April 22nd, right? I think we're leaving on the 22nd, thereabouts. Okay? Yeah. We got a good itinerary planned. It's going to be a great trip if you're interested, but we are going to go. But Israel, at their narrowest point in the center of the nation, right around where Netanya is, the nation itself is only 9 miles wide. I mean, that's, you get on the freeway here and you go 9 minutes at the speed limit and you've already crossed the nation of Israel. That's at their narrowest point, but nevertheless, this is not what God promised. This is not even close to what God promised. That raises all sorts of other questions, okay, which we're not going to discuss tonight. But you know, God's definitely given a down payment with the coming about of the nation of Israel in 1948. But does this suffice the promise? I don't think it does. The promise is clear. It's from the Nile to the Euphrates. I mean, that's very clear. Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, but where does that leave us in Bible prophecy? Who even knows? No one knows, quite honestly. Now, the question is in letter A in your notes, who passes through the pieces? Well, it's not Abraham. The Word of God tells us that you cannot make a covenant with just by yourself, right? So who is making this covenant? I personally believe, well, we know it's the smoking pot in number 1, the smoking fire pot. Ashan Tanur is the actual Hebrew word used here. And this would really refer or insinuate the Father, the Heavenly Father. Then in number 2 is the flaming torch. Aish Lapid is the Hebrew, and this really refers to Messiah. A couple of references, scripture references, would be Isaiah 62:1 and Zechariah 12:6. Now, what happens, this is interesting because have you ever wondered why did Yeshua have to die on the cross? How many know that if God had deemed it appropriate, he could have said, stand on your head for 5 seconds, do 25 jumping jacks, and do a backflip, and you're saved. How many know if God the Father said that, if that's what he deemed was required for salvation, that's what would be required for salvation. Is that right? Whatever he said is what it is. So why did he say Yeshua had to die on the cross, such a horrible death? To the point, the scripture tells us Yeshua could not even be recognized as a human being. He was beat to a pulp. All the movies we see, they don't even come close because you still recognize the actor. No matter how bloody and gruesome it is, it doesn't even come close, according to the Word. So why did he have to go through this? Because when you did this kind of a covenant, you had your two altars, and you would piece these animals, you'd cut them in half, lay half on this altar, half on this altar, and then you would traverse through the altars in a figure eight. Okay? Now, the figure eight, if you go into Egyptology studies, the figure eight laying on its side represents what? Eternity. This is a covenant for eternity. When God makes a covenant, it's for eternity. Okay, now, although that's an Egyptian thing, and I don't recommend using it, you can see beginnings and sources and meanings in these things. So they would go through the two altars like this. And both parties had to go through. So we read here that what went through, the flaming torch and the smoking pot of fire. So the Father and the Son go through. So what happens is you can, even the law in America is, if you have a friend or a family member that's on death row and they're sentenced to die, still on the law books, you can take their place. Still on the law books. Probably wouldn't happen, but Peter Miller in the Revolutionary War went to George Washington and wanted to die for somebody that was going to be hung for being a traitor, and argued this case with George Washington, and George Washington finally let the guy go, the guilty party, and didn't execute anybody because he was so moved by Peter's willingness to die in his place. And because this is a legal thing, even in American culture, although we don't see it practiced, you can do that. You can stand in for somebody. So what happens here is the father saying, okay, Abraham's in the corner having nightmares. Who's I can't make a covenant by myself. He says that in his word. You can't make a covenant with just one. You need two. So Yeshua, Melchizedek, steps up. He's probably been on the scene the whole time. He steps up and he says, I will stand in for Abraham. Now, the reason you tear the animals apart is because the meaning behind that is that if I break this covenant, I am to become like these animals beyond recognition. Now, Yeshua, he knows Abraham's going to break the covenant, fall short, doesn't he? How does he know that? For all fall short of the glory of God. Right? You didn't just fall short before you came to the faith. You still fall short. You haven't attained to, have you? We're still falling short of the glory of God. Think about that. We've never even attained to the glory of God yet. Never, it's not even a question of falling away. Falling back. We haven't even attained to it. Right? Okay? So the Lord knows that Abraham's going to fall short. So he knows he's going to have to become like the animals, torn to shreds. And yet he does it anyway. He stands in for Abraham and says, I will stand in for Abraham. Then in the Garden of Gethsemane, several thousand years later, he's crying out to the Father and he says, Father, is there any other way we can do this? Because, this is not looking good. This is not going to be fun. Right? And what does the Father say? No, there's no other way. You knew that. You knew that, but you chose to do this. That's powerful. That is powerful when you think about that. And that's exactly what's happening here. And these promises were to all of his descendants. Right? And that's our study for tonight, guys. I'll leave you on that high note. Yeah. Yeah, if y'all have nightmares, don't blame me.
Oh, we will. We will.
It's amazing how Gibson did that garden scene.
Oh yeah.
But even in that, it didn't even come close to